Hello, Professor. My name is George. Forgive the unsuredness. This is my first YouTube video, so we're going to try it. Hopefully, it goes well. Reading this article, Body Ritual Among the Nakarima, I believe it's pronounced, was interesting. First time I read it initially was very like, oh man, these body rituals and things that are depicted in the story from, these basins and rooms, and the measure of success by the amount of ritualistic rooms they have in presence in their house, was extraordinarily, just seemed outlandish, lavish. It wasn't something that I identified with. And then after about the third time reading the article, I realized that, hey, this isn't that unlike American culture. And then probably the fourth or fifth time I read through it, I realized that the Nakarima is just they're talking about Americans. These are bathrooms that are being talked about, and the measure of success being the amount of bathrooms in your house, and how we idolize what we look like so much, was interesting to me. And then reading through it again, realized that, like, oh man, this is all exactly the United States culture. We value what we look like so much. And initially, I remember my response being like, well, I mean, God created us beautifully. God says in the Bible that we are beautifully and wonderfully made. And this isn't the American way, but the truth of the matter is we've moved so far from that we all, at least some semblance, believe that we have some sort of inner work that we need to do to become better. These practices and rituals are things that we are required to do, and if we don't, somehow we become less than. I think one of the interesting ones that I got a hold of was that I held on to as I read through the article, was going to the medicine man that pokes holes in your teeth. And I mean, at first glance, you read that and you're like, oh man, that is horrendous, and then quickly kind of morph into this, well, that's the dentist. Nobody wants to go to the dentist. And that's just, it's so interesting how things can be communicated differently in a different context with another understanding. We could be seen with this mirror that's exactly what our experience is, but it just seems so outlandish, in that somebody like me would have to read through it 4, 5, 6 different times to even begin to understand that this article is simply just holding up a mirror to see the ritualistic things that we do to become a part of the United States culture right now. For me, that culture is changed a great deal. Sitting down with my late grandfather, talking about things, and my great grandfather was a very hardworking man. Grew up during the greatest age, what they call the greatest generation. He saw World War II, he saw the Great Depression, and was successful. He was a very affluent businessman. And he talked all the time that the value wasn't in how things looked. The value was much more in how things felt, and not in a sinful, simplistic way, but more in an acknowledgement that things are difficult and imperfect, but God gives us an opportunity to work through of those things. His patterns were far different than the world's patterns are now. I believe that the world's patterns are very much stuck in this place of how the world can serve us, and what comes, and what this commonplace of success and ideology is. And that comes with things like, how many bathrooms do you have? How many square feet is your house? How pretty do you look? How successful your kids are in school? And that's vastly different than the world that my grandfather grew up in. And I believe partially that has changed because I believe that there's just far more successful people in the world today. And by success, I mean the idea of success, that somehow money and bathrooms, as this article talks about, and beauty and places where you can worship what you look and feel like. Those are the measures of success now, and those successes have become the norms. These are the measures, and I think that throughout history, these things have changed because our measures have become different. Because life is so much easier now than it was then. I think that these changes are both beneficial and detrimental to us. I think that as a society, we have become very complacent and have been content living in an environment that requires very little to no effort. And I think that this is something that has put us into a place where any sort of pain or, as the Bible would say, sanctification, being set apart, is not okay. Life should be feeling good and easy and enjoyable all the time. And I personally just don't believe this to be true. And although it is great that we get to experience freedom in a time and place where things are so prevalent, it's also detrimental to us because we forget that life is a struggle. We are separate from Jesus, and life is not to be perfect until we are with Him. So I think that it's both. It's great that we have these things. I do think that the benefits we have are in part God ordained, but we have a tendency to create our own sin within the blessings that God provides. So yeah, it's a very interesting read, very interesting dynamic difference, and just how things can be communicated a different way within this article by Miner. That it really is just a reflection of our own experience, being put in a different way to where we have our own understanding and justify our pursuits of these understandings in this ritualistic behavior as normal. But when we read it, put it in a little bit different context, that the initial emotional response is that just sounds so astronomically devastating. Very interesting read. I appreciate it. Hopefully you are well. Thank you.